Hello friends, welcome back. Are you getting ready for an EF Core interview? This video covers the top EF Core questions you need to know to impress any interviewer. These questions dive deep into real-world scenarios, practical applications, and must-to-know concepts. So let's tackle what you really need to ace that interview. So today, let's get started. Alright, so before we get started, one request to all of you. Do not by heart. Instead, understand the concepts, and even if you explain in simple words from your side, that should be more than enough to clear the interview. Alright, so the very first question, what is EF Core and how does it differ from the regular entity framework, which is part of .NET framework, right? So there are two sets that I would say. One is an expected answer and one is explanation that is for your understanding. So you read both, and whichever is feeling good for you, you can come up with your own words. But in simple words, basically, EF Core is specifically meant for .NET Core, okay, that supports the cross-platform development and link queue improvements and better performance. Okay, it does not support every single legacy stuff, but it has many good stuff added to the entity framework core, including migrations and alternate keys, batch updates, and so many stuff. If somebody asks you what is the purpose of the DB context class in EF Core, okay, this is very important. They can easily find out whether you really know entity framework or not. So DB context is the main class used to interact with the database in EF Core that handles the CRUD operation like create, read, update, delete, all kind of operations. Not only that, change tracking, connection management, everything is based on this DB context. So I have given a simple example. You see this? If there's a class that inherits the DB context, then you'll be able to use any of the DB context, the database related stuff using the entity framework. So you might have seen something like this, right? DB set of the table name, and then you will be able to access the table name. And on configuration, you can define what is the SQL connections thing and so on. So, okay. The next question is, how do you configure relationships between entities in EF Core? So, expected answer is either the data annotations or Fluent API to define the relationship like one-to-many or many-to-many and even one-to-one. Okay. So, if you look at this, we have so many applications developed, and in some place, and in the DB context class where we will build the model builder, where you define these kind of things. So if you take a look at this is the online course enrollment application where we have defined the model creating, where you will define each table has what kind of relationship, right? So these are the configurations. So in this case, this is a table called the course, but it has relationship with the category table. It has relationship with the instructor table. So those kind of things, all the relationships like foreign key, all kinds of constraints, foreign key, everything is defined here. So this is how you define the relationship between a table, and this is called Fluent API. Okay, this is called Fluent API, but the other one is the data annotation. Data annotation is nothing but if you go to the definition of this table, there itself you can use the data annotation, but actually data annotation is very practically not possible to define for complex database structures. For simple database structures, it is okay, but if tables have some complex relationship, Fluent API is best, and this is the best example for that. Alright, so the next one is, what are migrations in EF Core and why are they important? See, migrations manages the schema changes. Schema changes means basically your database, today you design something. As your business grows, your database goes through a change. Some table might have some columns coming up, some structures changing, new tables coming up, those kind of things. That's called schema changes. So basically, migration manages schema changes over time, providing a way to update the database schema in a controlled way. So that is your expected answer. So migration, you should know what is migration. Basically, it's managing a schema changes. That's it. If you even tell these kind of simple, words, that's it. They will stop you. Good. They know that you know. That's it. That is how you will be able to impress the interviewers. And we have done the database migration. So coming back to again migration, there was one of the full stack application that we developed called restaurant table booking app, and that is what you're seeing here. You see this, there was a migration that we added. So as we progress the application, we know there was some database changes that was happening, and through migration we were able to push those schema changes to the database. Okay, so that is what called migration. All right, so the next one is, what is the difference between eager, lazy and explicit loading? This is super important. Okay, so basically eager loading means it fetches the related data with the main query itself. Lazy loading fetches the data when it is required to get the data, but explicit loading means you will like manually load the data. So explanation wise, you should understand, so every time that you do loading of data, like for example, there are a couple of tables having child and parent relationship. If you want to have a eagerly loading, every single data of those relationships are loaded at one shot. That's called eagerly loading. Lazy loading means like the query will be ready, but it will always fetch us the data only when it is required. That's called lazy loading. And then the third one is the explicit loading. So you just need to know the difference and what kind of types they have. All right. Next is, how would you handle a situation where you wanted to run a raw SQL query in EF Core? Basically, if you have a query like this, right, select star from customer, basically a table name where you're applying some filter. So if you wanted to run such a raw query, it's easy. You need to use the context.anytable dot from raw SQL, or like from SQL raw. If you do that and pass the query and then do a .toList or whatever next action, it will convert and it will execute and convert into your data set. Okay, so this is possible in EF Core. It's not like you cannot run a raw SQL query. Okay, you can do it. Now, what is the purpose of tracking in EF Core and how can you disable it? So basically, every single time you will query a database table, EF Core will automatically track the entities. So for example, let's say context.customers.first, or in other words, you take a look at this. This is the table, restaurant table booking app project that we did. So this context.timeslot is a table dot find async, right? So the moment you use like this, the data is coming here, but entity framework start tracking this data. So tracking is by default, okay? Because when it is tracking, if you modify this entity and do a save change, it knows what to do. Even if it wanted to delete this, it knows how to delete. Update, it knows how to update. So that's called tracking. The tracking is by default, okay? But if you wanted to disable the tracking, then you can use as no tracking method, which means it will retry the data, but it won't track. If you modify the data, it doesn't know what to do. But we need to know what is meant by tracking and why and when you can disable it, or how you can disable it. Okay, so you can disable it using this method. So tracking manages the state changes to the entities for the updates, disabling it with this one for read-only queries. So only for the read-only queries, you should use this kind of a thing, which will increase the performance. How do you handle the concurrency in EF Core? See, concurrency in EF Core, first you need to know what is concurrency. A given table's record, if more than one person is trying to update, then that's called concurrent. At the same time, same records, more than one person is trying to update. Okay, or even delete it, whatever it is, right? Delete or update is called, at the same time, is called concurrency. So to avoid that, you can use concurrency check attribute on top of the property that will help us to prevent this kind of a scenario. How would you structure the DB context in the large modular application? So as you are entering into bigger organization, the application is big. Each table will have its own humongous, database has its own humongous number of tables. So how do you handle it? So in the modularity, what they are saying is, if you use the DB context separated for read operations and write operation, that will help to have the good performance. Okay, so that's how you structure it. Now, can you describe how you would implement soft delete? So soft delete in EF Core, don't get panic. Hard delete means a table has a record that you really deleted. That's called hard delete. which you cannot retrieve. Deleted is deleted. Done. Soft delete means we might have some flag for a given record is active. Okay, that will be a column called is active. So for that particular record, if you make that is active as false, which means the record is there, but it's not deleted. It just doesn't come up. Similarly, is deleted, there's a flag. If you make is deleted as true, which means somebody deleted it, it's for them, it is deleted, but physically it is still present in the database. That's called soft delete. Okay, so whenever you retrieve it, you can query that give me everything that is not is deleted is equal to true. So that's called soft delete. How would you optimize AF core queries for the performance in a high traffic application? Like we already discussed, as node tracking can help you to improve the performance. Okay, so that is what you need to be answering it. What approach would you take to implement the transaction across multiple EF core contexts or the database? Great. Transaction is nothing but you're doing certain operation that has to either succeed or failure. Okay, that's called transaction, right? So today you start buying something. Okay, you're initiating your transaction. Let's say payment gateway went through an error, right? What happens these days? Either they will tell you that money detected, but they will refund you, but that doesn't makes you feel happy, right? So basically either it should go through or it should not go through. So if you look at this concept, we are starting a begin transaction within a scope. So whenever you use a using class within the scope, that's called scope. If you say using and then open this curly braces, anything that is within here is a scope. So we are starting a transaction. This is the transaction variable. Let's say before this there are 10 lines of code which does some update, delete, some addition or something. Everything has to succeed. Then if you do a transaction.command, everything will succeed, or everything, even if one transaction fails within this, right, everything is reverted. Let's say 10 lines of code, 9 lines code executed, 10th line didn't execute, something happened in the delete. Then this commit will make sure that all the others is also reverted. So that's called transaction. Now can you explain the change tracking under states? Very important question. Change trackings are nothing but if you start querying a database table using EF core, okay, the entity is tracked. Now there are 4 states: added, modified, deleted, unchanged. Like I said, you queried the data, you didn't touch it, then the state of that data is called unchanged. But if you modified any of the property within that entity, that's called modified. If you try to delete that entity, that's called deleted. Let's say there's a table you wanted to add a new record, then such a record's state is called added state. So these are the 4 states that AF code tracks. Okay, so if somebody asks you about this kind of questions, you should know what are the entity states and how it is used. Now the next is describe how you would implement an audit log for all of your code operations. Okay, so there is something called save changes and save changes async in entity framework code. If you override, right, that's called a virtual method. If you do an override of that method and do some logic to log your audits and then call the save changes, that's where you can do it in the centralized position. So that's what they're calling. Where do you do this logging operation in the centralized position? This is how you do. You override the existing save changes and then do your audit here. So in what scenario would you use raw SQL query? So if the queries are very complex where you cannot use the link queue to format that one, right, then you will end up using either the complex queries like this, like a raw query, or you write that complex query in a stored proc and you can use the stored proc. Okay, and for this specific question, if you use a complex raw query, what is the problem? That's what they're asking. If you are not sending the parameterized parameters, then it will be a problem. So you should always send the var class parameter as parameterized, then only no SQL injection can happen. Okay, how do you handle the large data set in EF core without causing performance bottleneck? So basically what they're saying is, let's say you're an Amazon user. If you have gone to this order history, you will be able to see 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or maybe 2 years, maybe not. or maybe a particular portion of a year you can see, but you cannot see all of your 10 years or 15 years of your Amazon account, because there is possibility that a huge data can come. So in order to get a good performance out of a huge data set, there's something called skip and take, which is an inbuilt link queue methods. You can apply that and filter only that particular record. For example, I'm saying skip the first 50 records, take the next 10 records. So 51 to 60. So it's like a pagination, right? You're on the 6th page. Each page will display only 10 records. So you can use these kind of methods to get particular data set of using EF Core. So what caching strategies do you use for EF Core for optimizing database load? There are two types of strategies. One is in-memory and one is the distributed caching. So if you're using frequently accessed data, you can use the in-memory caching, and for instance across different if you are using different instance and different places where in big companies they'll use, actually, then distributed caching is what you have to use. So what does that mean? Basically, different instance means in big organization, database won't be in one place. Same database, there will be replicas present in different data centers, like Texas. One is in Texas, one is in New York, right? They'll sync up the data in the real world, but so that's why they need a distributed caching. So if record goes and insert in one database, the same record gets inserted into another database automatically. That's called that and all will happen behind the scene. That's a database concept. Let's not get into EF Core, but basically you need to know in-memory and distributed caching. Alright, so how would you implement connection resiliency and retry policies? Very, very important. So let's take a very important live example. We have a web API which is using Azure SQL database. You deploy to the Azure App Service. Okay, so in general, right, in 20 minutes, if your app is idle for 20 minutes, app will go for sleep. Okay, sleep means if 21st minute, if some request comes, the app will start, then the database will be like starting and warming up. By the time all of these things happens, the first call will fail. The user will be like panicking. Oh my god, my APIs are failing. I'm not getting data. Applications crashed. All of these things will run in his mind, right? So what will happen is there is something called enable retry on failure. That's an inbuilt method that what it will handle is, if failure happens, it will retry in some time. Until it tries couple of times and completely fails, it will retry. And there is a very, very high chances that when it retries, the connection is established and database, it is able to talk to the database. This way, user response will be delayed, but he will get a response. Okay, so that's called enable retry on failure, which is possible in the EF Core, and that's called resilience and retry policies. Now we can also ask, how can you enable logging of sensitive data in EF Core for troubleshooting purpose, and what are the security implications? So let's say you're writing all of your beautiful queries and you just don't know how to debug in case your query, if you feel the query is giving you wrong results. So what you can do is there's something called enable sensitive data logging, and in the DB context option, let me show you. So if you say .sql, use SQL server and then say enable sensitive data logging, it will log the parameterized content also. Okay, so this way you know what parameter was passed in your query and what is your actual query. You can find out whether the query is wrong. If yes, then you have written the link queue statement wrong, so you can fix it. Okay, same thing. There is another one called enable detailed error logging. So there are sensitive enable sensitive data logging and enable detailed logging. So the difference between these two, that's the question. The difference between these two is the sensitive logging will log the parameter data, but the detailed logging will enhance the error logging mechanism. So you know what's actually happening with your query. Okay, so you can enable using these two options in the thing. Alright, so we have come to an end. So in this video, we saw how the interviews questions can come in EF Core, in .NET EF Core. So if you brush up on all of these concepts, you'll be able to clear EF Core interviews easily. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, do subscribe to my channel, share this with your friends. Don't forget to give a thumbs up and write your comments. And I will see you in next important video. Alright guys, bye bye. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tech tutorials. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Happy coding!